Hey, Steve Mignani here doing the Junkyard Crawl at Bernardston Auto Wrecking in Bernardston, Massachusetts with a 1968 Chevy Sport Van 108. Now this is the second generation of the Chevy van, which of course came along in 1964. And we got to remember that the Ford Econoline, the Falcon Econoline 1961, was the first American front engine forward control compact van, following the lead of the Wagon microbus. But again, the front engine was the thing that made the Econoline a leader in this country. And of course, 64, Dodge and Chevrolet both joined the fray. And the first generation of the Chevy van between 64 and 66 looked like this thing here. You can see it has a flat windshield. The headlights are up high. And it's similar to the second gen of 1967 up, but the difference is we can see at the front, the headlights moved way down about a foot from up here to down here. And of course, a curved windshield was another trait of the second gen, which was of course 1967 through 1970 on these Chevy vans. Now, the big thing about the first gen Chevy van was that they were strictly 6-cylinder and 4-cylinder, no V8s until you get into 1967 up. And these finally had the option of a V8 power plant. And this one here, this one's probably some old hippie shag wagon. I shouldn't say that too derogatorily, but this has a custom paint scheme on it. Kind of looks like the old panel paint. Hey there, puppy. Panel paint with web work, and must have been a pretty cool looking piece. Light blue, yellow, dark blue, light blue pinstriping. It was probably a good looking van in its day, going to Woodstock or wherever. But speaking of colors, the bow tie in 1968, 1 year only deal where it was red. And that identifies this as a 68. 69, that went to blue. So little tiny details all add up. But if you look inside the grille right here, to accommodate the V8 engine, the opening of that hallway, which brought air into the radiator, was made larger on these 67 and up Chevy vans. Now this one here, we can see the remains of this. It says here Sport Van 108, and that means this one here is the longer 108-inch wheelbase, all added right here. The first gen Chevy van was a 99-inch wheelbase van, all of them. But for second gen, you could optionally get the 108 with this big window and extra wheelbase for more cargo capacity. Now this one here is a V8, and this looks to be probably a 283 two-barrel, a 1970 only. You could get a 354 barrel in one of these things, which made it a muscle van of the first order. But we can see right here the dog house, which is not here now, but the engine bay is actually much wider on the 67 up, again to accommodate the cross-flow radiator to keep that V8 option cooler. You can still get a 6-cylinder or a 4-banger in these things. I believe the 4-banger was still available. But again, the 6-cylinder is what you usually found in these things. But that, again, is a little 283 two-barrel, maybe a 307, unsure. But vans often wind up in junkyards being used for storage of stuff. And in the case of this one, we can kind of have some fun here. This is a Mopar big block. We can tell it has the deep skirt design right here. Not a Hemi. If it was, we'd see cross-bolted mains and a whole bunch more meat in here. And I feel up to the top here, and I do feel, yeah, it's got the raised bump. This is an RB, either a 413, a 426, or a 440. Kind of a cool thing to find in the junkyard. Sitting inside of here, probably savable, who knows. GMC V6 valve cover right here, this weird looking thing. It's not a 409. This is actually too short to be a V8, but it's the GMC 6-banger, the 305. Kind of an interesting thing sitting here, and rust always wins in the end. Just ask Neil Young about that one. More goodies inside of this thing. We can see the battery hole right there. For the second gen vans, that hole, that's where the battery went. On a Dodge or a Ford van, the battery sat inside of a box behind the driver's seat. But Chevrolet, for the second gen, they did that. But here's the rub. For the first generation vans, this is a 1966 owner's manual, the final year for the first gen van, they had 2 locations for the battery. If we see right here, it says here for sport vans, the battery was mounted surface in that sort of hinged box. And on the Chevy van, utility vehicles, it was in the floor on the right-hand side right there. Kind of an interesting detail that the first gen Chevy vans, the battery was mounted one of 2 ways. And again, in the sport van, the surface mounting was about the passenger seats and the fact that there was a carpeted area right here, whereas the Chevy vans, it was buried under a rubber floor mat. Kind of a weird little detail. The devil is indeed in the details. And let's walk away along here. And we can see traces of that sort of tangerine orange with sort of this webbing, cob webbing, they call that, panel paint. Very cool, some pinstriping. And look at this, the can opener effect right here. This thing was dragged against something, and look how the metal I guess I might call it can opener or whatever, but it just basically coiled up. Look at that. I mean, the metallurgist would have a field day studying what happened to this piece of metal in its moments when it was being mutated into that shape. But again, we come to the back of this thing, and before we look inside, this is the third generation Chevy van right here, 1971 up. Had a snout on it like the 68 Ford Econoline. Finally gave people access to the engine through a hood. But again, these first and second gens are all flush face. If you want to look at the engine, you went inside between the front seats. But here we see inside of this one more goodies in the back. A Ford 8-inch rear axle. We know it's an 8-inch because if you look at the top of this, it's kind of flat right there. 9 inches are rounder. They look similar. And again, that's a Hotchkiss style rear axle. But again, that's a Ford 8-inch, not that desirable. Look at this old Delco battery right here. That's kind of cool, 12 volter. And we know it's a Delco because the caps say Delco. And if we look at it right there, we can see the little rest of that. Kind of cool. People pay big money for reproduction batteries, but that's an original battery, perhaps the original battery to this van. But something that was cool about the Chevy van, the second gen, was there was a 3/4 ton version, whereas the Dodge van of this period was strictly a half-tonner. In Chevy land, you could get 6 lug wheels and a 3/4 ton if you really wanted it. In fact, here is a 1968 catalog right here, or 69, I think. We can see here the red says the Sport Van 108 comes in 1/2 or 3/4 ton editions. And again, 6 lug wheels on 16.5-inch rims, something you can't get at this point in time on a Ford or a Dodge van. So that's where Chevrolet did make their vans a little heavier duty. And again, the 12-bolt rear axle on these things, pretty rugged stuff. But I got to say, this van's days of partying or going to Woodstock well, that's over. It's now in the woods where it's stock junk in Bernardstown Auto Wrecking's inventory of scrap metal waiting to happen. But again, if you like this video, be sure to check out, subscribe to the Steve Maggs YouTube channel, hit the like button and hit the bell so you know when the next video is coming out, which is tomorrow morning.